She had everything, a loving mother who sacrificed her own happiness to give her daughter the best. To the outside world, they were inseparable, a mother and daughter bound by love, struggle, and survival. But behind closed doors, a much darker truth was brewing. One built on lies, deception, and a thirst for something more. What would drive a daughter to kill the very woman who gave her life? What secret was so damning that she chose murder over confession? This is not just a crime of passion or a sudden lapse in judgment. This was calculated, cold, brutal. A mother's final moments spent staring into the eyes of the daughter she would have died for, only to realize she was the one who would die instead. From the moment Zyariah Colbert was born, she was her parents' greatest joy. A precious little girl with big brown eyes and a smile that could light up a room. She had everything, a beautiful home, designer clothes, the best toys money could buy. Her father, Malcolm Colbert, made sure of that. He was a successful businessman, and Zy was his princess. But fairy tales don't last forever. When Zy was just 5 years old, tragedy struck. A devastating car accident took Malcolm's life, shattering the world Zy had known. Her mother, Latrice Colbert, only 27 at the time, was left to pick up the pieces, suddenly forced to navigate a life she never imagined, one without her husband, one where she alone had to provide. The wealth they once had slowly disappeared, swallowed by funeral costs, unpaid debts, and the harsh reality of single motherhood. The luxury cars were gone. The extravagant shopping sprees ended. The private nannies were no longer an option. But if there was one thing Latrice was determined to keep, it was the life her daughter had grown accustomed to. No matter how many sleepless nights she endured, no matter how many sacrifices she had to make, Latrice refused to let Zy feel the weight of their struggles. She worked multiple jobs, cleaned houses, even skipped meals to afford her daughter's dance lessons. If Zy wanted a new dress, Latrice would go without one. If Zy wanted to go on a school trip, Latrice would pick up extra shifts to make it happen. Everything she did was for her daughter. And for years, Zy never had to feel the pain of what they had lost. But as Zy grew older, so did her hunger for more. By the time she reached 16, she was no longer the innocent little girl clinging to her mother's hand. She was beautiful, popular, and craving a life that was bigger than the one Latrice could give her. She wasn't satisfied with just getting by, she wanted to stand out. To be admired. To be envied. The world had changed, and Zy knew it. Social media had turned regular girls into overnight celebrities, flashing their wealth, their designer bags, their extravagant vacations. Zy wanted that. She wanted to be the it girl, the one who always had the best outfit, the most expensive hair, the kind of lifestyle that made people stop and stare. But there was one problem: Latrice wasn't rich. No matter how hard she worked, there were limits to what she could provide. And those limits didn't sit well with Zy. When her mother started saying no, Zy didn't see it as a sacrifice, she saw it as a failure. She didn't see the sleepless nights, the empty fridge, the bills that kept piling up. She saw only what she didn't have. The luxury cars. The high-end fashion. The money to do whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. And Zy refused to accept that. If her mother couldn't give her the life she wanted, she would find another way to get it. It started small, flirting with older men, letting them buy her gifts, pretending to be someone she wasn't just to get inside the world she so desperately craved. But soon that wasn't enough. Zy wanted control. She wanted power. And if she had to lie, manipulate, and scam her way to the top, so be it. She had no idea that her greed would soon turn deadly. At 17, Zyariah Colbert had mastered the art of deception. By day, she was the perfect daughter, flashing a sweet smile and promising her mother she was focused on school. But by night, she was someone else entirely, an illusion carefully crafted to match the life she wanted. A life of money, power, and status. A life far beyond what her mother could ever provide. Zy had always known she was meant for more. She refused to be just another girl struggling to get by. She wanted luxury, admiration, and the kind of respect that came with wealth. But wealth required money, and money required work, something ZY had no interest in. She didn't want to break her back for a paycheck like her mother. She wanted fast money. Easy money. And she found it. It started with sugar daddy websites, older men willing to send her money just to talk, to entertain their fantasies. At first, it was harmless. She'd send a few flirty texts, let them think they had a chance, and in return, they'd deposit cash straight into her account. But soon, she realized she could do much more than just text. She started making fake promises, selling dreams of meeting up, of being their perfect girl, of giving them something worth paying for. The men fell for it every time. And ZY? She never had to follow through. But that was just the beginning. ZY wanted more. She craved the rush of control, of watching her bank account grow without lifting a finger. So she leveled up. She created multiple fake identities, pretending to be different girls, each one more seductive and mysterious than the last. She would catfish men, manipulating them into giving her money in exchange for pictures and videos she stole from other girls online. She even started using fake sob stories, pretending she was in danger, claiming she needed money for rent, medicine, even a fake college tuition. And the men? They ate it up. Thousands of dollars poured in each month. And with that money, ZY transformed herself. She bought the designer clothes she'd always dreamed of, the high-end wigs and expensive weaves that made her look like an Instagram model. She booked luxury albums, posed in five-star hotels, and attended exclusive college parties, blending in with the rich kids who had no idea she didn't belong. But the more she had, the more she wanted. Soon, she wasn't just scamming men online, she was lying to everyone in her real life, too. She had never been a straight-A student, but Latrice believed in her. She believed her daughter was working hard, preparing for graduation, applying to colleges like she always dreamed. What Latrice didn't know was that ZY had secretly dropped out months ago. She never attended class, never took the exams, never had any intention of walking across that stage. But she couldn't let her mother find out. So she kept up the act. She forged report cards, lied about college acceptance letters, even went as far as buying a cap and gown to take fake graduation pictures. To Latrice, ZY was still her brilliant, ambitious daughter. The daughter she had sacrificed everything for. The daughter she was so proud of. But in reality, ZY was living a lie so deep, there was no turning back. And as the lies grew, so did the fear of being exposed. Because if Latrice ever found out the truth, about the scams, the men, the fake graduation, everything would come crashing down. And ZY couldn't let that happen. No matter what it took. The truth unraveled in the worst way possible. It started with a phone call, one Zyariah Colbert never expected to receive. The voice on the other end was calm but firm, laced with something Latrice hadn't felt in a long time. Dread. The school administrator's words were clear, cutting through her like a blade. Your daughter hasn't attended classes in months. At first, Latrice thought there had to be some mistake. Not her Zyariah. Not the daughter she had sacrificed everything for. But the more the administrator spoke, the harder it became to deny. ZY wasn't just skipping classes, she had dropped out entirely. No credits, no graduation, nothing. And yet she had smiled in her face every single day, acting as if nothing was wrong. The moment she hung up, Latrice felt her body trembling with rage, her heart pounding in her chest. All the sleepless nights, the extra shifts, the sacrifices, for what? For a daughter who had been lying to her all along? By the time ZY walked through the front door that evening, laughing on her phone, a designer handbag slung over her shoulder, Latrice was already sitting in the living room, waiting. The second their eyes met, ZY knew. What's wrong with you? ZY muttered, rolling her eyes as she tossed her purse on the couch. Latrice didn't speak at first. She just stood, her hands shaking at her sides. Sit down. ZY hesitated. Something in her mother's voice made her uneasy. But she sat. And then the questions started. Where have you been? Latrice's voice was eerily calm. Where do you go every day if you're not in school? Zy froze. Think. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, forcing a smile. I was just at, don't you dare lie to me. Latrice slammed a piece of paper onto the table in front of her, an official letter from the school. Proof. Zy's mouth went dry. I called, Latrice continued, her voice rising. I called them, Zyariah. You dropped out? After everything I've done for you? After all the money, the late nights, the sacrifices? You sat in my face and lied to me? Zy swallowed hard, her mind racing for an excuse, an explanation, anything. But her mother wasn't finished. Latrice snatched Zy's phone off the couch before she could react. And that's when everything went to hell. The silence that followed was suffocating. Latrice's fingers trembled as she scrolled, her eyes darting across the screen. At first, it was just confusion. Then horror. Then disgust. Zy lunged forward, trying to snatch it back. Mama, don't! But it was too late. The messages. The Cash App transactions. The fake profiles. Explicit photos. Everything was right there in her mother's hands. What the fuck is this? Latrice's voice cracked, her face twisted in disbelief. Who the hell are these men? Why are they sending you money? Zy's breath came out in short, panicked gasps. Mama, listen, you lying, trifling little whore! Latrice shrieked, throwing the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. Zy flinched. Mama, please, I can explain. Explain? Explain? You've been selling yourself like some cheap street rat? You've been scamming people? Using my house, my hard-earned money, to live like some filthy goddamn criminal? Zy's face burned with humiliation, her mind spinning. It's not like that. I needed the money. You couldn't afford. I don't give a damn what you needed. Latrice's voice was raw, shaking with fury. I raised you better than this. I sacrificed everything for you. And this is how you repay me? Tears welled in Zy's eyes, but they weren't from guilt. They were from panic. Mama, I swear I didn't mean. You didn't mean to what? To disgrace me? To turn this house into a goddamn brothel? Zy's hands curled into fists. You don't understand. You never have. You don't know what it's like to be laughed at, to be broke, to feel like a nobody. I had to do this. You weren't giving me enough. Latrice's face twisted with something darker than anger, betrayal. Get out. Zy's stomach dropped. Mama, I said get out. Latrice's voice cracked. I don't have a daughter anymore. You're dead to me. The words sliced through Zy like a knife. She had expected her mother to be angry. She had expected screaming, crying, maybe even a slap. But this? This was worse than anything she had imagined. Her entire body trembled. Mama, please, I'm turning you in. Latrice's voice was cold now, eerily calm. For fraud. For everything. If I don't, I'm just as guilty as you. Zy's world tilted. The panic clawed at her throat. This couldn't be happening. She couldn't lose everything. She couldn't let her mother ruin her. Her pulse pounded in her ears, drowning out every rational thought. She had to stop her. She had to. Because if she didn't, everything would be over. And Zy would rather die than go back to being nothing. Latrice turned her back. That was her mistake. Zyariah stood frozen, her mind racing. She had seconds, before her entire world came crashing down. Her mother was going to ruin her. Destroy everything. Turn her into a broke, pathetic nobody. That could never happen. Her eyes darted around the kitchen. The frying pan sat on the stove, still warm from dinner. Heavy. Solid. Her fingers wrapped around the handle before she could even process the thought. Latrice took one step forward. Zy swung. The crack of iron against skull was sickening. Latrice stumbled forward, gasping, clutching the back of her head as she crumpled to her knees. Blood, dark and thick, ran down her fingers. A weak, stunned moan left her lips. She was still alive. Zy felt her chest heaving, her breath coming in quick, panicked gasps. Her hands were slick with sweat, her heart pounding so loud it drowned out the whimpering sound coming from her mother's lips. It should have been enough. But it wasn't. Latrice groaned, her fingers pressing into the floor, trying to push herself up. She was still fighting. Zy lifted the pan again, her grip tightening. "No!" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rush of blood in her ears. "You're not ruining me!" She brought it down again. Harder. The sound was gruesome, bone-shattering, flesh-splitting. Latrice's body jerked, her limbs twitching as a strangled gasp escaped her lips. Zy didn't stop. She couldn't. She swung again. And again. Each blow fueled by something deeper than just fear, rage, desperation, resentment. All the times her mother told her no. All the times she made her feel small. All the sacrifices Latrice forced her to acknowledge when all Zy ever wanted was more. The pan slipped from her hands with a dull thunk onto the floor. Silence. Latrice wasn't moving anymore. Zy's chest rose and fell rapidly as she stared down at what she had done. The body, because that's all it was now, lay in a pool of blood, Latrice's face barely recognizable. Her mother was gone. A numbness settled over Zy, blanketing her in a surreal haze. The weight in her hands, the sticky warmth of blood splattered across her skin, the metallic scent in the air, it all felt distant, like she was watching someone else's nightmare. But the nightmare was hers. Her mind snapped into survival mode. She had to clean this up. She moved quickly, grabbing a rag and wiping down the pan, her fingers trembling. It was pointless. There was too much blood. It was everywhere. Seeping into the cracks of the floor, staining the walls, splattered across the cabinets. Panic set in. She needed to make it look like someone else had done this. A robbery. A break-in. Something, anything, but her. She sprinted to the back door and yanked it open, grabbing a nearby chair and smashing it against the glass. The sharp crash sent shards flying across the floor. She ransacked the living room, pulling out drawers, tossing jewelry onto the carpet, flipping over tables. It wasn't enough. The body. She had to do something with the body. Dragging it wasn't easy. Latrice was heavy, her limbs limp and uncooperative, dead weight in every sense of the word. Zy's arms ached. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she pulled her mother's lifeless form across the house and into the bathroom. The bathtub. She heaved the body over the edge, watching as it landed with a sickening thud. Bleach. She needed bleach. She grabbed the bottle from under the sink, her hands shaking violently as she poured it over the body, the harsh chemical scent burning her nostrils. It would erase the evidence. It had to. She wiped down every surface she touched. The doorknobs. The counters. Anything that could hold her fingerprints. Then, she picked up her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She needed an alibi. She scrolled through her messages, pulling up her friends. "Hey girl, I'm out tonight. Crazy party, you have no idea." Send. Another text. "OMG, you should have come. We're getting so wasted, El Mayo." Send. Her hands were still covered in blood. Her heart was still pounding. Her mother was still dead. But she wasn't caught. Not yet. The call came in just after noon. A neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, had been the first to notice something was wrong. She had seen Latrice's car still parked in the driveway that morning, untouched. That was unusual. Latrice was always out early for work. When hours passed with no sign of movement, Mrs. Holloway's concern grew. She walked over, knocked on the door. No answer. She peeked through the window. That's when she saw the mess, the broken glass, the overturned furniture. Something was wrong. She dialed 911. When officers arrived, they expected to find signs of a home invasion. But the moment they stepped inside, the crime scene told them a different story. The house was a disaster, jewelry boxes flung open, drawers yanked out, furniture knocked over. At first glance, it looked like a robbery. But it was sloppy, too sloppy. Nothing expensive was actually missing. Televisions, designer handbags, high-end electronics, all left untouched. A burglar would have taken those first. Then, there was the blood. It had seeped deep into the floorboards, pooled under the furniture. Whoever had tried to clean it up had done a pathetic job. Bleach stained the tiles, the air thick with its acrid scent. But blood wasn't so easy to erase. And then there was the murder weapon. A cast-iron frying pan, still sitting in the sink. Someone had tried to wash it, but forensic experts knew better. They swabbed it immediately. It wouldn't take long to find out whose DNA was all over it. That's when officers found her. Latrice's body was crumpled in the bathroom, dumped into the bathtub as if she were nothing more than trash. The once proud woman, who had fought so hard to give her daughter a good life, now lay lifeless, her skull shattered from the sheer brutality of the attack. This wasn't a random crime. This was personal. The search for Zyariah Colbert began immediately. It didn't take long to find her. While police were swarming the house, collecting evidence, ZY was playing a different game. On social media, she posted frantic messages. Has anyone seen my mom? She didn't come home last night. I'm so scared. She even uploaded an old picture of them together, captioning it with a long, emotional plea for prayers. She was selling the perfect image of a devastated daughter. But the detectives weren't buying it. By the time officers knocked on the door of a friend's apartment, where ZY had been staying, she was already rehearsing her lines. When she opened the door, her face was tear-streaked, her voice cracking as she asked, "Did you find her? Is my mom okay?" They didn't answer. They only asked her to come with them. At the station, ZY sat stiffly in the interrogation room, her arms folded tightly across her chest. A detective, a seasoned officer who had seen this act too many times before, slid into the seat across from her. "Tell us about last night," he said. ZY sniffled. "I was out with my friends," she said. "We were part—" The detective nodded slowly, jotting down notes. "That's interesting," he said. "Because your phone data says you never left home." ZY's face twitched, but she recovered quickly. "I left my phone at home," she said. "I must have forgotten it." The detective didn't blink. "Funny. Because your social media says otherwise. You were texting friends, posting stories, all from your phone. And guess what? The GPS puts you right at your house." The color drained from her face. "And they weren't done yet. We pulled some deleted messages from your phone," he continued, sliding a printed copy across the table. "One of them says," he pointed to a specific text, reading it aloud, "I'm so done with that bitch." Silence. ZY swallowed, her hands trembling now. The detective leaned forward. "You want to explain that?" She shook her head rapidly. That wasn't about my mom," she lied. "That was about someone else." The detective sighed, rubbing his temples. "Zyariah," he said slowly, "we already have your DNA on the murder weapon. Your fingerprints on the pan. Your mother's blood on your clothes. You don't need to lie to me." Her breath hitched. The room was closing in. Still, she tried one last desperate attempt. "It wasn't me," she whispered, her voice trembling. It was one of my sugar daddies. He came over, they got into an argument, and—" The detective scoffed, shaking his head. "Enough." Her lie didn't hold up. The so-called sugar daddy had a rock-solid alibi. Video surveillance placed him miles away at the time of the murder. And that was it. No more games. No more lies. The golden girl. The privileged daughter. The one who had been handed everything. She was done. The trial of Zyariah Colbert became one of the most sensationalized cases in recent memory. The moment her arrest was announced, the media latched on to every gruesome detail. Headlines screamed about the girl who had it all but threw it away for greed. Talk show hosts debated whether she was a cold-blooded killer or a victim of an unforgiving society. True crime podcasts dissected her social media presence, analyzing her posts for signs of a hidden darkness. But it was the resurfaced videos that truly gripped the public. Clips of Latrice flooded the internet, smiling, laughing, showering ZY in praise. "My baby is going to do big things," she had once gushed in a video, beaming with pride as she talked about ZY's future. Another clip showed Latrice at one of ZY's school ceremonies, clapping proudly as her daughter received an award. The stark contrast between the mother who had loved her child so deeply and the daughter who had bludgeoned her to death with a frying pan sent the world into a frenzy. Comment sections were a war zone. "That girl is pure evil. She killed the one person who actually loved her. Latrice raised an ungrateful monster." But others defended ZY. "Y'all don't know what went on behind closed doors. Maybe she snapped because of years of abuse. Some parents pushed their kids too far." The divide only grew as the trial approached. When ZY was brought into the courtroom for the first time, cameras flashed wildly, capturing every inch of her demeanor. She was no longer the polished, carefree girl from Instagram. Her hair, once flawlessly styled, hung limply around her face. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She had lost weight. But what struck people most was the lack of emotion in her expression. She walked in shackled, her face unreadable. No tears. No visible remorse. The prosecution wasted no time in painting her as a manipulative, self-absorbed killer. She murdered her mother because she saw her as an obstacle, the lead prosecutor told the jury, voice dripping with contempt. Zyariah Colbert wanted to live a lavish life, scamming men and pretending to be something she wasn't. And when her mother tried to stop her, she killed her in cold blood. They showed the jury the forensic evidence. The blood-spattered frying pan, the bleach-soaked floor, the failed attempt to stage a robbery. They played the deleted text messages. "I'm so done with that bitch." The GPS data proving ZY had never left the house that night. Then, they played the most damning evidence of all, the voice memos. Latrice's voice filled the courtroom, sharp and furious. "You're a filthy whore, Zyariah. A liar and a scammer. I should call the cops and have you locked up right now." Then, ZY's trembling response. "Mama, please, just let me explain." The courtroom was silent as they listened. Then came the sound of a struggle. A thud. A gasp. Then silence. The jury listened, stone-faced. The defense tried to argue that ZY had acted out of fear. "Latrice was verbally abusive," her attorney said, pacing the courtroom. "She belittled Zyariah constantly, called her disgusting names, threatened to ruin her life. Zyariah was terrified. She acted in a moment of panic." They called a psychologist to testify about the effects of emotional abuse, trying to paint ZY as a young woman who had been pushed past her breaking point. But it wasn't enough. The evidence was overwhelming. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 4 hours before returning with their decision. Guilty. First-degree murder. ZY sat motionless as the judge read the verdict. She didn't cry. She didn't react. Even as the judge delivered her sentence, 35 years in prison, her expression barely changed. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Latrice's family sobbed in relief. Reporters whispered into their microphones, already preparing their headlines. And then, as she was led away in cuffs, Zyariah finally spoke. Cameras caught her lips parting, her voice chillingly calm. "I did what I had to do. The world would never forget it." This case is a haunting reminder of how entitlement, desperation, and greed can drive someone to commit the unthinkable. Zyariah Colbert had everything. A mother who sacrificed for her opportunities for success, but in the end, her desire for wealth and status led her down a path of destruction. ZY's story isn't just about a crime, it's about the cost of illusion. The illusion of success. The illusion of control. The illusion that money and status can erase the truth. Latrice Colbert believed in her daughter, supported her, and wanted the best for her. But that wasn't enough. ZY wanted more than what her mother could give, more than what she had earned. And when the lies she built started to crumble, she made a choice that could never be undone. A single moment of rage. A single act of violence. and a mother was gone forever. What's truly disturbing about this case is how many young people today can relate to Zyariah's mindset. The pressure to appear successful, the obsession with material wealth, the belief that if you don't have it now, you never will. But at what cost? Was this murder inevitable, or could ZY have been saved from her own desires? Does society glorify materialism to the point where it blinds young people from true success? It's a conversation worth having. And if this case shocked you, stay with us, because there are many more stories just like this, where love, lies, and betrayal collide in the most horrifying ways. Like and subscribe to Crime Mysteries for more cases that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you.